If you thought that every member of Generation Z would be clamoring for life in the metaverse, it probably surprised you to see the uptick in online videos of 20-somethings churning their own butter, raising chickens, planting tomatoes like they were characters in Little House on the Prairie. My next guest says young people are running, not walking, back to the ways of their great-grandparents, the way they used to live. The question is, why? What is the appeal of farm life for these digital natives? What are they looking for in these traditional lifestyles? Joining me is a Gen Z homesteader who is pointing the way for her generation to a new future that looks an awful lot like the past. Welcome to today's podcast, Gubba from Gubba's Homestead. First, it's amazing how easy it can be for your whole day to get derailed. 1 minute you're standing there living your best life, and the next minute everything comes crashing down around you because you're living with pain. I know what that's like. I know how it can just go on and on year after year, where you get to the point where you just feel like you can't go on, you can't live this way. You feel like you don't want to go on. Please, if you're at that point, please just try Relief Factor. It may not work for you, but 70% of the people that take it, they go on to order more month after month. I'm one of those. It's a daily drug-free supplement that could help you feel and live better every day. So join the over 1 million people who have turned to Relief Factor and have started feeling better in 3 weeks or less. Visit relieffactor.com or call 800-4RELIEF. 800, the number 4-RELIEF. It's relieffactor.com. Gubba, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. First, I have to ask you, Gubba, how did that name come about? I'm imagining it's not your birth name. So how did you get Gubba?
So, you could say it's my birth name because I have been called Gubba ever since I was little. I would say it's like a family name that's been passed down. Yes, it's been a family name. I know that it was within my mom's family. Someone had the nickname Gubba. So I got named Gubba. Yeah, going to the family.
So I find you and people like you fascinating. I have changed so much in the last 20 or 30 years. I was all for, better living through pharmaceuticals and the mass production of food and all of this stuff. And I have come to, honestly, I grew up in Seattle where all of my crunchy hippie friends were. And there is something happening. I think our food is killing us. I think our pharmaceuticals are killing us, or at least addicting us to always having problems and having to go to the pharmaceutical companies. And now this is becoming a big deal with conservatives and young people as well. You're 23, right?
Yes.
So how did you, have you always been like this? Because you live in Seattle area, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And no, I have not always been like this. So I relate to you in the sense I was eating the ultra processed food that has been chemically modified to keep us addicted. I was on the pharmaceuticals. I was vegetarian for a while. So I was really in that matrix. I lived in Portland for a while. It was really... Yes, I did. And so I absolutely relate to where you are coming from because I found myself walking outside of that matrix and now I am homesteading and I am connected with my food. I'm disconnecting from Big Pharma and really see what is going on and how we're being poisoned.
So how far down this rabbit hole are you? Do you churn your own butter?
Yes, I do. I do make my own butter. It's actually a super easy process. So yeah, I do churn my own butter.
Wow. It's super easy?
Yeah, it is. You just get heavy cream and you can either shake it in a bottle. That's an old fashioned way. You can churn it. Or if you have a KitchenAid, you can just mix it until the buttermilk and the butter separates. It's so easy.
Huh. Is there anything that, I mean, you have a washer and dryer, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Good. 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 Um, how far down this road um, did you think you were going to go? And how far down this road are you? Like, what are the modern conveniences that you just don't use or do?
I would say I am pretty far down the road. So I am set up to be off grid if that is a scenario that comes up. So I have my washer and dryer, but I also
Right.
have a line outside that I can dry my clothes. I have the
Right.
ability to wash my clothes without a washer. So I'm set up to live without these modern conveniences, but I still enjoy them, if that,
Right.
yeah, the best of both worlds.
Who are just like, I'm going to live off grid and everything else. But then there are also influencers. And you're like, well, but, back in the 1800s, they didn't have the internet. So there's kind of a clash there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I get that a
so
lot.
what first turned you on to this lifestyle? Why did you make this turn?
Well, 4 years ago, when we had COVID, the pandemic that erupted, going to the grocery store, I'm not sure if you had this experience, but
Oh,
seeing the
yeah.
empty grocery store shelves, the fridges were barren, the freezers were barren, people were going crazy fighting over bags of dried beans. And I still remember
Mm,
staring at those empty shelves and I said, what am I doing here? I am relying on a system that breaks so easily. I have become dependent
mhm.
on this unreliable system. And I said, I am never going to find myself in this situation ever again. So that's what really spurred me. And I think started to really awaken a lot of other people was COVID and seeing, hey, our food system is not reliable. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I sat down with the president of Toyota Global, and I asked him right at the beginning of COVID, can you explain the just-in-time, production line, the way we build things? And it started with, we don't want to have a warehouse. We don't want to have to pay for a warehouse. And he told me that the seats, let's say they're made in China, but they're assembled in America. He said the seats don't arrive until 12 minutes before they're installed in the car. So they're taken off the truck and put, and I said, who thought this was reasonable, that this would never break down? And he said, well, it didn't. And he said, we were kind of trapped in it then. I mean, people don't understand, if there's war, 19 out of the 20 or 21 biggest pharmaceuticals or medicine that we get from China. We can't even make it anymore. That's not smart.
no, it's not smart. And I feel like people are having that realization, especially with the pharmaceuticals, thinking about, okay, if the system fails, how am I going to survive? I don't have the medicine or I don't have my food storage. So that's been a big part for me is the food system, watching that break down.
So is this for, I mean, do you have to have a lot of land to do this?
No. So homesteading, and this, I talk about this so much online. Homesteading is a mentality. Homesteading is a lifestyle. You do not need land to homestead. You do not need land to become self-sufficient. The best place to start doing this is in your kitchen, cooking from scratch, having a little windowsill garden, and learning these skills like how to build a food
Yeah.
storage, how to preserve food. You don't need land to do that.
I have to tell you, the image of what is behind you, it is beautiful. I'm a visual guy. It is absolutely beautiful behind you, but it also reminds me of my grandmother. Probably would have been your great grandmother now. But they did these things. My mom did these things. They canned, and it was just normal in my family that you would you'd go and pick the vegetables, you grow everything, and then you spent the summer canning it. And so you had food for the rest of the year. That was, according to my grandmother, what saved them during the Great Depression.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an inspiration from my great grandma. The stories that have passed down, the same thing. They grew all summer, had to preserve through the winter to feed her family of 12. And
Right.
I think about this a lot. There's this wisdom in this generation. So my great grandparents, your grandparents, and then we had these generations of convenience. And now you have this younger generation that is trying to bridge the gap because they're seeing the system collapse. I'm seeing the system collapse. And so now we're trying to get that wisdom of how to live self-sufficient again.
Yeah. It is. It's not just that we're seeing it collapse. I think we're seeing the real bad fruits of this tree starting to take root. We're beginning to look at things entirely different. I mean, I think this is the biggest change of attitudes and perception in my lifetime. And I've seen a lot in my lifetime. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that absolutely makes sense. And that goes back to what you were saying of how you used to rely on Big Pharma. I did too. I ate the processed food and now I'm waking up like, hey, I'm kind of seeing the bad fruits of what's going on. This food isn't good for me. These big pharmaceuticals aren't good for me. That's what I was thinking when you were relaying that.
Where do you have a line? First of all, when it comes to food, what differences have you seen in yourself and others around you who are eating like this?
So what I understand is you're asking like eating a more homestead, like cook from
Yeah,
scratch kind of
right.
lifestyle. Well, I've noticed I have lessened my dependence on the grocery store because I'm not going there to get the ultra processed foods. I'm paying attention to what is going into my body. And because of that, I feel good. Because of that, I look good. Before I started to integrate these ways of life, like cooking from scratch, being aware of what is going into my body, I struggled with anxiety. I had acne. My hair was thin and falling
Mm.
out. And now I feel good. And now I'm looking good. And I know that's from what I'm nourishing my body. I know that's from how I've changed my lifestyle. I've turned off um, outside sources that were causing me stress and negativity and just brought it home
So you
to,
must not have ever listened to me in the last 4 years.
I have actually, I have, you pop up.
Really?
So, yes, you do.
Wow. I would think that would make your hair fall out because it's made mine
It's good
fall
to
out.
be aware. It's good to be
Yeah.
aware, but also keep your peace.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to pharmaceuticals, where is your line? I mean, there's some things it would be good to get rid of, some things that are causing us problems, but then there's things like antibiotics.
So my line is if you think of if I got a cold, I will make my own cold medicine. So if I have a cough, I'm putting onion in honey and making my own cough syrup. I don't do anything over the counter. I really utilize herbs and essential oils. But I do agree everything has a place. And when it comes to pharmaceuticals, I think it's going to just be up to you and your body and what you feel comfortable with. And like you're saying with antibiotics, if someone feels that is their need, then I'm all for it.
Yeah.
That's where my
Well, but I
line is.
mean, so if you have a really bad infection, let's say you cut yourself and you're infected and you need to have antibiotics, would you use them? You.
So if would I use antibiotics? I guess if it
Wow.
was a thing, life or death,
Yeah.
I'm more focused on why am I getting that infection? What is going on in my body that is going to make it so I am getting sick? I'm very terrain based in keeping
What does that mean?
it means like I'm nourishing with proper minerals and vitamins. I'm getting sunshine. I'm getting my vitamin D. I am properly keeping myself stress free so I don't have negativity in my life that is bringing me down energetically. So I am keeping myself healthy. I am keeping my terrain in a regulated environment. And so I really look at the source of why I am getting sick. I haven't been sick in over 2 years now. And
Wow.
that's why when you're saying if I got cut and got an infection, I would be concerned of like what's going on in my body that caused that.
Huh.
Hmm.
I have a ranch. I'm at my ranch now up in Idaho, and I also live down in Dallas, Texas. And I'm leaving the ranch and going back home to Dallas, and I just feel better up here mentally. It's a huge difference when you're in a small town and people are connected to the land. I love living around farmers. I mean, when we first started looking for a place up in the mountains, everybody said, "Oh, you should go to Jackson Hole, or you should." No, no, that's New York with a mountain. Living by farmers, I have discovered what I rejected when I was a kid. I couldn't wait to get away from the small town. Um, Farmers understand that you can do everything that you can do, and then you have to rely on God. And if your crop fails, you have to rely on your neighbors. And you want to take care of your neighbors because if they're having a hard time, you're going to have a hard time at some point. And so you take care of each other. You don't have to talk about and be so stressed about, oh, I got to have the talk with my kids. My kids, it starts with, why is that animal on top of the back of that animal? You know, everything seems to make sense and your stress level goes way down.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you just said with integrating community and relying on God, I experience those things every day. So while it can be stressful with animals getting out, fencing breaking down, I have that peace and I have that sense of community. And that even reminds me, yesterday I went to an organic apple orchard, a local apple orchard. I'm very a big proponent of supporting local. And so I went to this apple
Yes.
orchard, these apples, and I met with the orchard owner who was in his 80s, and he bestowed all of this wisdom on me on how to keep an organic apple orchard because that's what I want to do. And just thinking about how there's this wisdom out there in your community, you just have to find it. You just want to
Yeah.
go out, seek it.
Yeah. And it's amazing how it's lost. I have a car. It's an old 1970s Jeep, an old Willie. And I cannot keep this thing running, and nobody knows why. I mean, you can't plug it into a computer, and literally everybody's like, I don't know. I mean, I had to go find an old guy who still was working on these cars. That when we lose this knowledge, it's gone, and we'd have to learn it all over again. That's not a good thing to do.
No, it's not. And you're saying learn it all over again, but would we be able to learn it all over again? That's my question. Or is the knowledge
Wow.
just forever with this generation?
Yeah. So what do you rely on for electricity?
I just have normal grid electric. So I
Okay.
do have backup generators if power goes out for certain things, but I'm on the grid.
Do you want to change that?
I am happy with my setup right now, but I am very focused on if power goes down and if power goes down for a long time and unforeseeable time, I am still prepared and I can operate pretty much normally.
Hmm. Okay. So, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would have been a complete oddball. But now with people your age, you're what, about 24?
Mhm.
Um, are You're not an oddball anymore, are you?
I wouldn't say so. I feel like I started homesteading, like you said, 4 or 5 years ago. And it was like, oh, like what's she doing? Building a food storage? That's kind of crazy. Like you're a hoarder.
Yeah.
But I started to share online and I've seen this trend of homesteading really rise because people are wanting to reconnect with those roots. They're wanting to become self-sufficient. And it isn't such an oddball scenario anymore because people are looking around saying, hey, I need to get ready.
Yeah. What is define homesteading? What does that
So
mean exactly?
So when I say or when I think of homesteading, I'm thinking of self-sufficiency, but also having a community. So like when I'm talking about I can operate if the electricity goes down, I can still wash my clothes, I
Yeah.
can still feed my family, I can still cook. So you're self-sufficient. You are living in tune with your community, you're supporting your neighbors like you had mentioned earlier. That's what I think of homesteading. It's really a lifestyle that you can have from anywhere and a
Yeah.
mentality.
I will tell you, I live in a town of about 450 people. And we're good 45 minutes away from any, real store, any chain. And we have all talked about who has what skill, who has, expertise in this or has this piece of equipment. The town just built a communal smokehouse, and nobody knew how to build it or anything. But we're starting to think we're taking your idea probably a little further and saying, as a town, how can we come together and share what we need to share to be able to get through tough times? There's a town probably 20 minutes from here that everybody has a job to make pizza. Somebody is growing the wheat, somebody is learning how to grind it, somebody is growing tomatoes, somebody has the oven. And so this town of about 1,200 people, they know they can survive with each other because everybody has a skill that can give them some sort of food. It's an amazing thing.
Yes, it is. And I feel like that's in our human nature. I don't think humans were meant to sit in cubicles under artificial lighting in the cities. We were meant to have these communities, like you're saying. And I've done
Yeah.
that here on a smaller scale with my neighbors, where we've met together and we've talked about skills and plans if there's ever an emergency situation that arises. That's what I advocate for. That's the dream.
Yeah. So you said that you felt like you were living in the Matrix and the Matrix imprisoned you. Can you explain that and tell me why you
Yeah.
felt that way? And
So, when I am talking about the matrix, a good example is the food that we are eating. If you go and look at a loaf of bread in the store, you're going to see on there created with bioengineered ingredients and a long list of ingredients, 20 plus ingredients that you can't pronounce. And you're like, man,
hmm
what's going into my body right now? Or you turn on the TV and you're watching this media that is maybe warping your mind one way or the other. You're
hmm
being put into a position of being controlled. Also, when I speak of the matrix, I'm talking about the environment that you're living in. It goes back to Roman times, right? When they put on the big Colosseum events, kept the people
hmm
entertained while all this stuff was going on in the background, society
right.
collapsing. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. I don't want to be at the Coliseum. I want to know what's going on and prepare for it. And I'm very happy
Yeah.
in doing.
It's weird. Companies, when you hit about 120 people, the company shifts because now people are not equipped mentally and just biologically. We are not equipped to have relationships with more than for your individual, for more than like about 20 or 30, and as a community about 150 relationships, and anything over that, it all just falls apart. And you can see companies as they grow, they will grow past 120 or 150, And some of them survive that, some of them don't. There is something with social media overwhelming people with friends. You're not built to care and to be able to balance that kind of a friendship circle. You're just not. How do you balance that?
So balance, are you asking like how I balance having connection with so many people online?
Yeah,
Or
and your thoughts of keeping your circle tighter
Mhm.
than so universal.
Yeah, so I do have an immediate tight circle, and I'm very comfortable in that. I feel like this stems from being comfortable within myself. I don't need a lot of friends to feel comfortable being out and about. I'm very
Yeah,
happy
yeah.
being introverted. But when it comes to being online, I feel like I've been online for a while and I have been able to build a connection with a lot of people. So I do see that where it says you can't have a connection with over 120 people. But I think on a broader scale, if you are
Yeah,
presenting your genuine self and you want to
yeah.
help people, you can create a connection. I feel like you've created a connection with a lot of people. So
Yeah, but I think it's different. Like I don't and it's so easy to fall into this. I don't read comments generally,
Mhm.
especially if they're negative.
Oh yeah.
I am not living for the next like, you know. I'm just being me, and if you can grab something from that, that's great. And if I can grab something from you, that's great. But it's not the number of people you interact with. It's how these are not friends. You know what I mean? These are people that you're just connecting with outside of the world. And when you lose sight of what real friends are and your inner circle, you don't make it.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think that is a good line to draw. And with the boom of social media, I feel like that line, like you're saying, has been blurred. Like, what's a friend? Where's my real connections?
Correct.
But yeah, for me, online, I do like to respond to those comments. I do like to forge connections and just help people in that sense. But I also do avoid the negativity. But
Yeah.
I am aware of what's real and what's not for me.
So how much of this is that there's nothing real anymore? Um, we're questioning absolutely everything. And when you're growing it yourself, when you're you know uh, canning it yourself, when you're actually, I mean, I really believe that, idle hands is the devil's playground. Uh, I really believe there is something to hard physical work that just changes you. It is very important, and we've missed a lot of that. And when you are doing that, you're working with your hands. You're working, especially with the soil or what you consume. Um, you know what's real. It's hard to explain. Have you felt that way, that you don't have a problem with reality?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like what you're saying with feeling what's real, I pictured when every day I go out and milk my goats. And so I have this picture, this connection to the milk that I drink. Whereas if you go to the grocery store and you just pick up a jug of milk, you don't know the
Yep.
animal that it came from, you don't know the farm that it came from, what the state of those animals were. So you do have this mental sense of reality and also this physical sense of reality, so that is what I am thinking. It has been really mentally uplifting, physically uplifting. You know, you're solving these tasks in your head and then you're mentally and physically going to do them.
So I don't drink a lot of milk, but my kids do. And um, talk to me about raw milk, because I grew up. It's got to be homogenized, and the way the government is taking down the Amish is absolutely incredible to me. People that have never had a problem, nobody they serve has ever gotten sick from their food, but the government has got to stop these Amish people. Tell me what the deal is with raw milk and why it's so much better for you.
Well, so raw milk, and this is such a loaded question, but I love it. I love raw milk.
Okay.
So let's start raw milk and the pasteurizing movement. That I view was a real disconnect from people and their farmer. So just like what I was saying, I can go and get milk, raw milk from my farmer. I see the cows in the field. I know the practices that they are using to get the raw milk. They have a clean environment. But now when you go to the store again, you don't know that. You don't see the animals.
Yeah.
Most likely these animals are in diseased conditions, and then they pasteurize it because you don't want milk from a diseased animal. So they pasteurize it, get rid of all the gunk, and then they serve that to you at the store. So we've lost that connection. And then also the big dairy industry is such a huge cash cow, literally. So you have this disconnect.
Except local dairies. Local dairies are in trouble.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay.
What's interesting is I have where I'm at is farmland, and it used to be dairies everywhere. And I talked with an old farmer, and I'm like, hey, what happened? Because it's very dilapidated now. All the dairies got taken out. And he spoke about how the government came in and started offering incentives, and they just took out the dairy industry and they took it to this big mainstream big dairy. So we have this disconnect from our farmer. And I feel like when they start disconnecting us from our local farmers, we then depend on this big system.
Yes.
And we see them fail like we saw 4 years ago. Also, raw milk, it has all these vitamins, minerals, fats. And when you pasteurize it, the enzymes and the carrier proteins are wiped out. So when you have the pasteurized milk, you may still have the vitamins and minerals in it, but your body can't absorb them. Your body doesn't know what to do with them because they don't have the carrier protein. They don't have the enzyme. So then your intestines are like, oh, I'm actually going to have a reaction. We're now going to be lactose intolerant, and you're going to get sick every time you drink pasteurized milk. And what I've found with my raw milk is it's easier to digest. I have friends who have tried it who were lactose intolerant, and they could digest it. So there is some really amazing, miraculous thing in this raw milk that our ancestors have drank for thousands of years and was, I believe, by God, the land of milk and honey.
Yes. I have to tell you, too, I mean, when I was growing up in the 70s, I didn't know anybody who was allergic to a peanut. And I remember when they first started showing up, I was like, what is wrong with you? You have a peanut allergy, thinking that it was just an isolated thing. With all of the allergies that are going on, you cannot tell me that did not come from our lifestyle and our foods. It had to have.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. You look at the ingredients and you wonder, well, it starts to make sense why everyone's so sick and has such weird allergies.
So you're a big proponent of locally sourced meat. I am as well. I have cattle, and I like the local butcher because I know him. I know, his facility. I know the quality of beef I'm getting, especially if it's mine. But I'm also a big fan of them because there's only 4 processing plants, and 3 of them are owned by foreign countries in America. And it is not good. 2 of those processing plants are also, coming up with the bugs to eat and also the non-meat meat. I don't trust that. That's big meat, and it needs to be broken up. But it's hard to get a meat processing plant in your area now.
Yeah, it is. But that is why I advocate so much online is find your local butcher. So I even feed my dogs raw dog food, and I support my local butcher by buying from them, or I even go and dumpster dive from them. Yeah, get the scraps, and that's what I grind myself into their food. But it is, again, reconnecting with our local communities and supporting these people who aren't industrialized and commercialized and are real local families. So butchers are so crucial.
Yes. I will tell you that I have German Shepherds, and I was shocked to be told the truth that, up until the 60s or 70s, the main food that dogs got was just scraps from the table, and they were fine. And now you're being taught scraps are bad for your dog. That's really, really bad. Don't do that with your dog. That's the opposite of the truth.
It is the complete opposite of the truth. And you look at the cancer rates in animals just skyrocketing on kibble. Go look at the kibble, and it's soy and it's cornmeal and it's byproducts. And there's constant recalls on their kibble because animals are dying and it's being covered up. So this is interesting because it's not only our food system that is being profited on, but also our pets' food system. And that makes me even more sad because they don't have a voice, really. They can kind of tell us how they're feeling, but they can't say, hey, I'm sick. The food you're giving me is making me feel horrible.
Well, because I started working with a supplement company and, for dog food, for people who feed their dogs kibble food. And when I realized that stuff is sterilized by law, it has to sit on a shelf for 2 years plus. If I fed my children something that was so sterilized that it could not decay at all in 2 years, they would not be healthy. But that's what we're feeding our dogs.
That's what we're feeding our dogs. And it's no wonder that cancer in dogs, cats is completely skyrocketing other health ailments.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I always just thought that, because I know, if my dog growing up would have had cancer, I don't think my folks would have said, well, let's put him on cancer treatment. I mean, just you couldn't afford it. So I've always wrestled with that. What happened? Why didn't I not realize? Did we just not diagnose, or did we just not look for that, a cancer? I didn't know that there is a huge increase in cancer in animals.
Yeah, there is. And so you just think of the pharmaceutical industry hasn't only infiltrated us, but it's also infiltrated our pets. But this goes back to what I love so much is I go to my butcher and I get a big box, 80 cents a pound of organs. So liver, heart, I'm getting bones and stuff I could eat. So I could eat that. I could cook up the heart or the liver, but 80 cents a pound. And when I share that online, people are like, wow, you were getting the best parts. Why are you giving it to your dog? But if you just go to your local area and you start looking around, you can find these sources too, like I am.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So let me switch gears. Before I switch gears, I just want to wrap this part of the interview up with, there are people that are calling for an end to modernity. And depending on who you're talking to, some of them believe an end to everything post-Enlightenment, that even the Enlightenment was a bad thing that happened to human beings. I strongly disagree that learning how to scientifically, study things and prove one is better than the other and questioning everything, I have a hard time believing that is bad. But you're a believer in the scientific method and modernity, just not all of it, correct?
Yeah, I would say, it boils down to who's funding, what is the purpose of the study, more that, because I do dive into scientific research and I will share things that I find online. So yeah, I am totally into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it kills me that, some scientists say, there is no God. If God exists, he is the chief scientist. He is the chief mathematician. I mean, it's too accurate to not have whoever created it be really in tune with math and science. Anyway, so let me change subject. There's something else that I think you consider yourself as, that I think I understand, but I'm not sure, and that is trad wives. What is a trad wife? Do you consider yourself a trad wife? And how does that manifest?
Yeah, so I would consider myself a trad wife, and I feel like that trend has been on the rise. And that's more if you think of, our great grandmas or our grandmas who were at home and
Hmm.
they were tending to the home and the children and making the meals, preserving the food. So that's how I look at it. And I am making the home my centerpiece. I am preserving the food, tending to the garden. And I know there are different ways that people look at that, but that is what's important to me. And yeah, I guess I would consider myself a trad wife in that sense, but I also do have a work ethic where I have no problem going out if I had to go and get a job or whatever, I would
Right.
still be okay with that.
But our grandmothers did that too. I mean, my grandmother, they worked in the factories when the men were gone for the war. I mean, you know, and that is not a, is this a pushback, do you see, on feminism, or what is this a pushback on?
I would say it is a pushback on the movement of feminism. So, a lot of people view feminism as a way of taking the woman out of the home, getting another tax paying entity in the house. So,
Yeah.
it's not the father anymore who's paying
Yeah.
taxes. You also have the mom. And then who's raising the children? The children are off in government schools or daycares being raised by other people that you don't know. So, this tradwife movement is a pushback on that and saying, hey, there was a role for the woman in the home,
Right.
and they're trying to take that back.
So my mother was born in, I don't remember, 38, something like that. And she was too old to be a burn your bra kind of person, but she was too young to be my grandmother who, didn't know how to drive or anything else. And once you drive an old 1950s or 40s truck, you know why women didn't drive. I didn't want to drive that truck. But anyway, and she really had a hard time because she didn't fit either side. She had desires to do things, but she was just at the tail end of that traditional housewife. It wasn't right for her. And she didn't see herself as a strong feminist. She didn't want all of that. She didn't reject men. Um, what do you say to people? How would we balance this? I guess when it's an absolute, it's always bad. But when there's choice and you can do whatever, it's good. Is that how you balance it?
Yes, I absolutely love the ability to have a choice. And I feel like I align with that was your mom, right? Who was
Yeah.
right in the middle. I feel like I align
Yeah.
with that because I was born in the time where I need to go to university, I need to get a job, I need to have a degree, and which I did get a degree and I was pursuing medical field, but I didn't really want to do that. And now I'm returning to my roots, but I also work because I have my own skincare company, tallow based, all natural that I do and I work on every single day. So I'm somewhere in the mix of that too. I'm working, but I'm also have these trad wife elements in my life.
How many kids do you have?
I don't have any.
Don't have any yet. You are married, though?
No.
You're not married yet. You plan on being married and having kids?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, what is important in a man for you? What are the things, the qualities that are really important to you?
Well, we talked about the matrix earlier. So someone who would be able to see the system that I see, how our food is poisoning us.
Yeah.
Someone who is able to realize that what you see on TV is not always real, fabricated. There's a war for your mind. So someone who understands
Hmm.
that. Someone who is able to work hard is driven. Someone who has drive, they're not just okay with
Yeah.
staying in something that they're not completely happy with, but constantly chasing
Right.
something. Someone who wants to also have children and raise them with good values, hard work, work ethic, pass on those things. So that's what I think of is someone who would be like-minded. I feel like it would be difficult to be with someone who is consuming ultra processed food, who doesn't quite want to be on a homestead. Um, that's what I think.
And children, how are you thinking that you at this point? It's just kind of out there. But how will you raise your children? Will you homeschool? What are you thinking?
So, homeschool, most definitely. I feel like if we look at the public education system, there are quite a few problems there, and you send your kid off. Yeah, I'm putting it
Yeah.
lightly. You
Yeah,
send
putting
your
it lightly. Yeah.
to sit in a desk under artificial lighting and um, homeschool, absolutely. And in my community, there's a lot of homeschoolers. There's actually a lot of Amish as well. And I
Mm,
intermingle with a lot of these different communities and I see how they raise their kids. And I'm very inspired by that. I watch the farmer who comes out to my field, who he pastures his cows and he brings his little boys with him. And they're out there
yeah.
herding the cows. They are interacting with me
It's
on
amazing.
yeah, they're young and they have this amazing conversational skills that they are using with me. And so there is something with kids watching their parents interact daily with other people doing business transactions. And so I 100% plan to homeschool my kids.
I will tell you that, I when I was when I was living in New York and everything, that city never sleeps. And I didn't. I had a physical ailment, but I didn't go to the doctor because I didn't think it was an ailment because I was only sleeping about 4 hours a day. And I thought that was a great advantage because I could get so much stuff done. Didn't realize that's really bad for you. And so as my body started to fall apart, I was like, oh, okay, okay. But when I was talking to somebody, because I was so incredibly busy, and I talked to a guy who was the head of, he was the CFO for Citibank, and before that, he was the CFO for American Express, and he was always traveling. He was always someplace during the week, and I said to him, "How do you balance your life?" And he said, "Well, there is no such thing as balance because you're always cheating one for the other." He said, "I try to integrate my life. And if I can, my kids come with me. We just try to stay as a family and we do it all together as much as we can." And I noticed, because I started doing that with my kids have talked to presidents and prime ministers and, farmers. If you don't treat your kids like kids, you don't talk down to them. You just expect them to participate in the conversation. It's amazing how different they are.
Yeah. And I feel like exactly what you're saying is I see that here versus these communities, the Amish, there's German Baptist and other homeschool groups, these kids versus
Yeah,
kids who are in the schools all day. There's a difference. And I would not deny that. It's almost night and day from my interactions, but there is this powerful truth of just not talking down to your kids, almost having
yeah.
expectations. And I see it.
So when my kids turn 16, the schools demanded that they have a phone and that they have an iPad. And I know, and it changed them entirely. Um, Things that weren't real suddenly became very important, and even their conversations changed. It's just bizarre. How are you going to, when you're older and your brain has settled, it's still very dangerous, but if you have your wits about you, you can navigate like, you obviously do. How are you going to deal with technology with your kids?
I have thought a lot about that because screens are addictive. And I have no clue what the technology is going to look like in 10 years. But I've also
Uh,
thought about how I have a social media presence. I plan to never share my kids online because I
yeah,
feel like that could be dangerous for them. They don't have, consent on if they want to be a part of my
yeah,
social.
yeah,
I do feel like because I've been online for a while and done social media, I will have a better grasp of what is going on in their online lives, on their phones. And I really want to navigate that screen time. I feel like, can you avoid it? It can be avoided in some scenarios, but technology is a part of life. And I feel like if I never learned to use it at such a young age, I would not be where I'm at. So it is a delicate line to walk of
yeah.
safety, of realizing what is reality, like what we talked about earlier. And what you're saying with like kids, I feel like that's even harder for them to decipher. They're seeing this super edited image on their phone and they're like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
well, pretty as them, or my hair is not as perfect. So helping them navigate into that.
I mean, I don't know if you're probably not old enough to remember, but the big debate, especially for women, was the beauty magazines and the images of women, and they could never live up to that. Look at what the filters do. Look at the manipulation. And I've noticed that people, it's so fascinating. I'll be out in a crowd and I'll be watching, I was at a football game recently, and I was watching these younger people take pictures of themselves all over, and they would take them as a group, and all of a sudden they'd smile and have that pose that you've seen on social media, all of them. And the minute it's taken, it stops. And they don't ever pose like that. They don't ever, it's not real. It is, it's so dangerous and intoxicating. Because it's not who you are. It's not real. It's not a candid photo. I don't think candid photos even really exist very much anymore.
I completely agree with that. And I pictured that in my head. I know exactly what you're talking about with that
Yeah,
scenario. And then done, they go back to their phones. And you're like, wait,
yeah,
where's the interaction? I call it zombie. Like it's very just
uh-huh,
zombie, mindlessly
yeah,
droning. And it's like you're just sucking your mind into your
yeah,
phone online and you're disconnecting from what's actually going on around you. And I feel like that's a bigger agenda in and of itself
yes,
of the
it
phones
is.
just taking our reality
It
away from
is.
us.
It's funny you call them zombies because I walk in and I'll see my kids on the phone or whatever, and I'll say, "Hey, crack addicts, how are you?" Because it's really like crack. You try to take somebody's phone away, and it's like I'm an alcoholic. I'm a recovering alcoholic. It would be like somebody saying, "You know what? I'm just pouring all of this alcohol down the drain." No, no, no. I mean, I would have gone into full-fledged panic. And I think that's a way a lot of people deal with social media and their phones. My wife says, because she is in a good way, she is constantly texting and everything else. And she'll say, I'll say, honey, stop. And she'll say, honey, I have to take care of these things. Our life is more complicated now. These didn't make our lives easier or better. They made them much more complicated. I'll say to her, we did fine before the phone. We can, I don't carry a phone. I don't have a phone. I don't want a phone. If somebody, if, it's kind of like people who, will judge me and say, well, he's really just, you know what? Call me. If I've said something that really offends you, call me. And if you say, well, I don't have your number, then you're not a close enough friend to be able to feel justified in judging me. You know,
I
it's just a different world. Go ahead.
Oh, it is a different world. And thinking about that, we have such instant access to people. Like what you're saying, someone
Yes.
could text you who they just have your phone number. They're not even close with you and say, hey, I'm offended. But back in the day when it was just the dial phones, you didn't have that instant access to people. And so when we have that instant access and we have all these things to do, these phones, these tablets have really made our lives more complex. I completely see that. The aspect I really don't like is that instant access that somebody can have
Oh
to
yeah.
you through your phone, the
Oh
message, and
yeah.
then why aren't you replying? Well, I don't have to.
It was interesting to me, as bad as the COVID shutdowns were, um, for my family, it was actually good. I mean, we all stayed together. We played games together. It was much more like it was when I was growing up, where everything was just slowed way down. And all of us at the end said, I'd prefer this than going back. Yet everybody went back. Everybody went back.
Everybody did go
Uh,
back, and I feel like that's,
yeah.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, no, no.
With working from home, so many people worked from home and they had that element like you were talking about. They were with their families, they had more family time, and it was rewarding. And so when that finally came back and the companies were calling people back into the office, they were like, why do I have to go back? I just made it work outside the office and this was so amazing. It boils down to I don't think people are made for that. We're made to be with our families and function as these units.
Um, do you ever feel like our society is so far down the road that there's just no turning back, that there's just, it can't be fixed, mass scale?
Yes, I do feel like that. And I know that's very doom and gloom. I do feel like it is pretty far down the drain and it's scary to see where it's going. But with knowing that, it's still good to have your foot on the ground. It's still good to find that happiness with your family, with yourself first, with your family, with your community. Go outside and enjoy the sunshine every morning, hear the birds
Yeah.
chirp. And so finding this peace within yourself, within your area of life, but also being aware of what's going on. And yes, I do feel like that. Do you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. But I have faith that uh, that remnants, the right remnants, can be saved. But it's going to be a real struggle because there is going to be this ability to be taken care of and to unplug from everything. You know, with AI and everything that is coming with that. There's some of the Yuval Harari, who is a terrifying scientist. He is a guy who is a futurist, and he has been saying, we're just going to have to keep the people on gaming and drugged because there's not going to be real meaning for life because they're not going to be doing very much. So how do we keep them going? That is a terrifying outlook. We should probably reconsider if you have to take a large portion of the public and keep them drugged and addicted to gaming. We probably shouldn't be pursuing that.
That's a horrible trajectory to think about. And then that boils down to our individual selves because where does change start? It starts with us. And that's going to be the motivation within oneself to say, hey, I don't want to be addicted to drugs and gaming for the rest of my life. I don't want that for my kids. So what can I do now? So I feel like these changes need to be made now so we don't end up like that.
One last question. You want to homeschool your kids.
Mhm.
You have a skincare business. You churn your own butter. You think you're going to be able to do all of those at the same time?
Yes, I absolutely know I'll be able to do all of them. It boils down to scheduling for me. And I have this drive, Glenn. I've always had this drive ever since I was younger. If I want something and I'm going to figure out however I can to go and get it. So when I see an obstacle, I figure out a problem or I figure out the solution for the problem and I do it. So looking at all these things of my homesteading life, I mean, there is always things going wrong, fences, cows getting out,
Yeah.
prospect of homeschooling one day, and my skincare business. I'll figure out solutions. And that's what I encourage online. I get so many questions. How can I do this? Or I can never do this. Yes, you can. The change starts with you. You just need to want to do it.
I'd love to meet you in person sometime and have one of your home cooked meals. You're wonderful. You're
Hey,
really
yeah,
wonderful.
good. You understand that.
It requires me to go to the Pacific Northwest, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it will.
I'm in Idaho. That's probably as close as I want to get to my old stomping ground because it has changed so much. But
Yes.
thank you for being part of positive change, Gubba.
Yeah, thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you. You too.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.